People assume we prepare more than we do.
We're live, Trina.
Oh.
Don't go on here. Don't go on here talking about how we're not prepared. don't go out here talking about how we just pulling these topics out of our ass like before we go live. These are fleshed out, right? We had a whole document listing point by point of what we're going to go into, right? Right. Well, what are we going to go into today? Today is okay. So we are back again. Pat Stedman podcast episode 9 with the great Trina Nuance. We are talking today. By the way, this podcast is going to get renamed, but I told Will I'd wait to rename it until Will and I will do a show and we'll talk about the new name. We supposed to do that yesterday or 2 days ago.
Meta.
Yeah, so meta. So it's still Pat Stedman podcast episode 9, but it'll end up being like retroactively affected and changed. But anyway,
you want to call it dynamic something.
Shh.
Oh, sorry.
So today we're going to be talking about relationship boundaries. We're going to be talking about really relationship issues and polarity problems, resentment. How do you change a dynamic in a relationship? Can you change a dynamic in a relationship? And really, what's the path forward? What kind of stuff causes relationship issues? So, I want to talk about this. I'll start this off, Trina, just because so for two people to work out, I think we agree there's got to be some baseline substrate of trust and shared values. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, and I want to distinguish between views and values. I think a lot of views have started to become kind of synonymous with values, but a lot of that's almost like a personal choice, how much a specific, let's say, political view feeds into a deeper philosophy of life and how you want to, if and how you want to raise kids, where you want to go with things. So I'm going to try to be more generic with values, that maybe there's some political overlap, maybe there's religious overlap, but even politics and religion have like a really deeper substrate in terms of what sort of dynamic you want to have in your marriage or your relationship. And, do you want to bring kids into it? How do you want to raise them? How do you want to orient yourself in life? Let's put it that way. So you need that. But what's going on with like a lot of relationships is they might have some of that, but I feel like there's still like a lot of problems and misunderstandings that people are having today. And so first I want to ask you, like, why do you think a lot of these relationships today aren't working? Why are men and women? Let's go first to the problem, and then we'll talk about like how to solve it. Why do you think so many of these relationships are falling apart?
So loaded. It's such a loaded question. First thing that come to mind are there's I don't think there's ever been as much external pressure on relationships, right? From social, like cultural pressure, social media pressure, community pressure, family pressure. I think, and I'm not as well versed in history, so I want you to amend anything I'm saying. It sounds like back in the day, which we've kind of touched on a lot, is there was a way more neat boundaries for everything, from roles to good and bad to blah, blah. And now with like the internet and with all the social political stuff happening, there's so much external pressure on things, which like when people feel pressured, they speed up. They need to like go in a certain place, right? And if there's so much external pressure and you don't have a solid internal compass or anchor in whether it's your values or your goals or your like whatever those things are, that combination is so messy. And I think a lot of that external pressure is like, you know, if the issue is a relationship isn't communicating well, then there's so many different inputs that they could, like, people can scroll through social media or have conversations through social groups. There's so much extra data that can inflate that muddies the actual A to B communication happening. Or if the problem is um, gaps in values or ways of life, or then the external pressure could be viewed as options or reasons to be angry instead of solution oriented, or life circumstances, right? Like, I think circumstances are almost such a luxury as people evolve through life that actually I think that's a really huge culprit, right? Job evolution, location evolution, people feeling like the way that they do things is out of step with what's working for everybody around them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to address it really broadly.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's like a little scary for people, especially when it comes to marriage, is that you can get married and you might feel like you have like who you are then. It may, like, you may be drawn to another person because that other person, they balance you out, but they might balance you out in like a distorted way from how you are at that time, right? So
What do you mean by
let's
distorted? Like, in a way that doesn't align with where you are, or in a way that
well,
makes it
let's say you have you're weak in one area, like you have a dysfunction and they have a dysfunction, and those two dysfunctions kind of feed off of each other. So there might be some like real connection and stuff. You might be drawn to each other, but it's almost kind of like a trauma bond kind of. I don't want to say trauma bond, but it's like, because trauma bond kind of indicates that you went through something together and you bonded, but it's like that you have like a bond based on like dysfunctions, like the dysfunctions are kind of compensated for each other, and then so you might be brought together because you haven't dealt with that part of yourself yet. But as you start to deal with that part, and that person actually may start to reveal a lot of this, right? Like, because you're getting triggered, let's say they're angry, you're sensitive. So like their anger triggers your sensitivity, which is kind of like you being a victim, for instance.
Mhm.
So you start to, over time, you're like, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm not going to, and you start to develop more boundaries and more self-confidence. Well, you don't want to be with somebody who's angry then. You don't want to be with somebody who's got a temper issue.
Yeah.
So you may have gotten with them before, and even though maybe this part of them didn't feel good, it was like you were linked together because of an issue that you had. As you deal with that issue, you almost have to like renegotiate that relationship. And if the other party, like, they're not going to give up that anger issue, they're not going to see the same thing, like, I'm ready to give up this and let's try to create something new, then the relationship will fall apart,
Yeah.
right? Because and I think this becomes like a really difficult thing. Like, you really have to, if you're going to be with someone over a long period of time, it has to be growth oriented. I think you have to be very, very like always almost like aware of what's going on and both trying to move past it. And if one of you is not doing that, I don't think it lasts on a long-term time frame. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like your point for a couple of things came to mind. One was, I feel like people who last long term, I've never been married, right? So I'm speaking secondhand right here. But I think that people who last long term seem to, either nothing really has changed, so there hasn't been as much friction with those points. But if one of them or both of them or the external situation or something has changed, like you describe it as renegotiation. So it's like you collaborated at an initial point that you found each other, and that worked for more reasons than not. And then you get this other destination point where I think it's funny because you almost imply that people get to that point and already like as a given decide that they're going to renegotiate or decide that they're going to recollaborate or decide that they can influence the trajectory of things. And I think that in and of itself, even before we get there, is an issue, right? Because and for good and bad reasons. I think on one level it can be examples like, oh, you can't change people, right? Which is fair, right? And then maybe if we were to call the opposite extreme of that is, okay, but if this is important enough, then we should probably explore the potential of influencing the continuation of this. So what does that look like? Right? I found you like this and we found this dynamic like this, but now I have, say, for example, because you just said you used trauma as a thing. Say somebody got together in a situation where like one of them had a really weak boundaries and then the other person could just like bulldoze them and the dynamic just honestly like it was like it worked to some degree for that stretch and they reach a new stretch where that person grows and is healthier and can actually stand up for themselves and have healthier boundaries and now that is triggering the other party and that party can be like, oh, there's no way it's going to work with this person. And it's almost like, or even if it does work, that's so much work. Like it would just be easier to start over with somebody new.
Right.
So the renegotiation has to be, I think I want to hear what you think about this. I think the first thing is like decide, right? Am I going to try to put effort into like renegotiating this or going through this point? Or am I giving up? Because I think if you stay in the middle of that decision, there's no point because you can just half-ass both.
Yeah. I mean, so like, obviously not everybody follows it, but the idea of a marriage bond is that you're supposed to lean in
Yeah.
to that. But at the same time, when is enough enough? You know, you can be dealing with I do think that there's a certain point where you're dealing with the pattern for such a long period of time that your exhaustion with the pattern can if it doesn't if there really isn't like change forthcoming from the other party, you can become almost tired of the other person because you associate them with that pattern, you
Yeah.
know, because it's been happening for such like you almost feel like this is this relationship. I don't want to have this relationship anymore. And I think that the difficult and it requires some degree of faith is that you have to resist the impulse to try to make the other person change because like you said, you can't make somebody else change. You can't make somebody else change. And actually, even if somebody tries to change for you, it doesn't work because a lot of times that's just a repeating of a pattern. Like they're trying to please you in some way to keep you. But it has to be like a genuine shift on their
I was
part.
almost going to say, may I challenge that? But then you said it has to be a genuine shift. When you
Yeah.
said if they change for you, that doesn't work, I felt like it. And of course, my brain goes to, in what cases would that work?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in what cases would that work would be what you landed on, which is it would have to be a genuine shift, which I think implies, and I think you'd agree, if they change for you for the sake of the marriage, that's implied where you like, we're not giving up on this. And that change benefits them and benefits the relationship and benefits you and is a positive sum, which I use the shit out of that term. And it's genuinely like they feel like they benefited from it. They
Yeah.
weren't just people pleasing or self-sacrificing to make it work. Then I think that lowers the chance of I changed for you in this, and later I'm going to resent it because I departed from who I am. I actually grew.
Yeah. I mean, it goes a lot better when you can show what they have to gain from it,
Right.
from the change. But I think you have to say like it's more effective for you to simply say what you want
Yes.
rather than to be like you have to do this.
Yeah.
Because then you get into like an ego resistance. Um and you do want to lean back to a certain extent. You say, this is what I want. And it's kind of like, this is what I want. Can you like, can you go there? It's what I want. And also, you know, this is what I want to give you. Can you go there? And one of the things that I think is at the base of a lot of problems in relationships is, especially once you control for things like the values, right? Because that's a whole nother issue. I think a lot of people, maybe if they're going through values changes over the years, that the closer it gets to a values changed, I think the more unstable that relationship becomes, because values are so personally held. Like, you can say like a behavior, you can point out, hey, you and I are on the same page in terms of what we want, but the behavior is not getting us there, right?
Mhm.
That's a much easier change to make than to say like, oh, you actually don't want the same thing as me. Like, well, I don't know what we're gonna do then. You know, that's a problem. Um, and I think a lot of it when we get to the behavioral stuff with couples that really love each other has to do with the polarity, and you know, whether there is really like a strong masculine charge and a feminine charge, what that looks like on a more integrated level. Because what I've seen is really jumbled polarity.
Mhm.
And the result of it is you have a lot of the things that you hear, like the manosphere talk about, with, you know, nagging, disrespectful, emasculating behavior from women. But you also hear from men a lot of, you know, like almost oversensitivity to a lot of things that come out of women.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting when you think about it. Like, if I use the term, I trigger so many people by using this term. Actually, to be fair to them, I understand where they're coming from. It's really a semantic issue. But, you know, I talked about how men wanna be respected and women wanna be cherished. People are like, women are like, women like to be respected. What do you mean?"
Oh yeah, I saw that. I actually really enjoyed scrolling the replies of that one.
Someone pointed
Agree with
out
you, though. That's
that
really good analogy of what you're saying in terms of polarity, because you know I'm like a blah, blah, blah. So that's, I want to add to that really quick. When you say men want to be respected and women want to be cherished, and everybody assumes that means, oh, women don't want to be respected and men don't want to be cherished. What you're pointing at is the overall umbrella of something that gives it some sort of grounding, right? Because while you can swim your ass off in nuance, and I think I can too, if you get to a place with nuance where nothing is true, then oh, shit, everybody's gonna drown,
well,
right? So there has to be
what I
some sort of anchoring.
what I respect about you, Trina, is that you always, and you just said it earlier, is that you look to see in what case could it be true. So, like, I think it's a difference between a lot of people on the internet and you and me, which is that when you see some post, like, you don't think immediately about why it's wrong. You try to give it like the benefit of the doubt first and say, okay, well, where are they coming from? What's the context where it could be correct? So you try to see from what perspective they're coming from.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, a lot of people, it's just, you know, they're trigger happy. But
Well, they're projecting and I'm projecting. My projection just tends to be different. My
yeah,
projection is, oh shit, I part of my self-awareness journey has involved me representing myself in certain ways or saying certain things and being retardedly unaware of what that implies or communicates or represents or what assumptions that magnetizes, right? Just because I'm a little crazy.
well,
And so because I've had that and I like really earned some awareness to that, I feel like when I look at a POV, I'm like, okay, what could they be speaking from? So that's my projection, which is, I guess, beneficial from
yeah.
being not angry.
No, and I think that with the term, when I said like it's a semantic issue, someone noted that maybe the better term is honored versus respected. I think respected, there's been like a linguistic creep in terms of what the word means. Um, but you know, like, obviously it doesn't mean that women want to be treated poorly. And I think that people think if you're not being respected, then you're being treated poorly. But it's not really the connotation exactly. The connotation is like respect is it is like a sense of honoring, like acknowledgement of contribution, acknowledgement of, you know, leadership, right? Like there's a sort of deferential aspect to it that is really what I meant from what respect is, that you're not going to, you know, you don't disrespect like a leader, right? Um,
It's a starting point in my view, right? Instead of being like, you know, okay, the woman who wants to be, you know, sitting on the stage uh and, you know, commanding a room, and she's like the boss bitch president or whatever it is, and she's like, I'm up here getting respect. And then the guy who's, you know, oh, like this man is, I wish to really cherish him, so da da da. Like if those are the starting points, that's, you know, that's illustrating something very different than what we're talking about relationally,
mhm.
right? Where people on a really, I would say, soul deep level, like start with, you know, like, and you can see it as early as like when we're kids, like, you know, let the boy like play and, you know, have the, you know, feel like he's, I don't know, like uh I don't know, like puts on a cape and saves the world, and then the woman's like, you know, like make sure that she's like feels safe and like runs to mom. Like these are just really fundamental, and that's not to imply that, you know, that there doesn't need to be a place for the masculine energy to feel cherished, or the feminine energy to be able to get a sense of respect, but just on a super starting point core thing is what gets lost.
Well, I think a lot of it is that a man will feel cherished almost as a result of being like honored or respected.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same in reverse for a woman, that a woman will feel like respected as a result of feeling cherished. And if like a woman, if a man is just seeking to be cherished, it's gonna feel like a very emasculating dynamic, right? But I think a lot of guys have fallen into that in relationships, that they want to be like, oh well, you're being, you know, you're being mean, and I don't feel like you care about me, and like there's a lot of that that's coming out, and women really don't like it. They don't like it at all. But so where is this coming from? I do think it has to do with the damaged polarity in general, that like the guys are emasculated and they're seeking this out. They want respect, but they're actually like asking in some ways to like, hey, cherish me, and the woman's kind of repulsed by that. And in the same way that like the woman is kind of like, respect me, you know, you should be respecting me. But then if the guy does, she doesn't feel cared for, and so she's then upset. Like a lot of women, they really want to feel cared for in relationships, and they don't feel like the guys care for them. They don't feel like that. um they don't feel like the guys looking out for them or trying to take care of them. And it seems like so much of this conversation is the guys are like, well, you know, you don't treat me with respect, so why would I do that? It's just like a real like mess. And I think so many of the dynamics, I wonder how much of what we call like, you know, incompatibility issues between individuals today, how much of that is genuine personality incompatibilities versus just like there's not enough like personal chemistry to overcome these deep-seated polarity problems
Yeah.
that, you know, because here's the issue, and this is what I come to, and I've been coming to more and more of it when it comes to polarity, is that I don't believe that a person can feel truly confident about who they are if they're sexually depolarized, right? Like if a man doesn't feel like a man, he's not going to be able to feel like you can't almost express the highest definition and even like a more complicated integrated expression of himself if he doesn't have that fundamental mastered. And I think it's very like similar course for women. I don't know, what do you think?
I think I agree with you. And where it gets mistaken is, this is interesting. One of my really close friends went, I draw in my brain super nuance and gray. In my brain, I don't think that the gray and us being able to swim through nuance happens without the white and black poles.
Yeah.
So she asked me some sort of question along the lines like she doesn't agree with, she doesn't think right or wrong or black and white really exists. And I'm totally paraphrasing. And her view is just like each thing is one of one, you know, like each scenario. And while I don't disagree with that, because I'm all about nuance, I really can't see that unique scenario existing without those poles. And I think this points to what you're saying, where it's like, if you say, for example, just now you said something about I think the starting place is like if a man is anchored in his masculine and a woman is anchored in her feminine, then the more anchored they're there is the more like they can swim out and into the sea of gray. But again, it's just the starting place. So when you talk about a dynamic and maybe she has more of that leadership thing, or more, is more respected than him, and he has more of that like submission, like what's it called? Would you just say cherished thing? Then if we're to talk about exploring the potential to shift that dynamic to support more polarity, I think you almost have to look at the return on like the ROI of sacrifice, right? Because the woman who has like the frame or what I want to call it is, you know, she's going to feel like she's like giving up control, and she can either feel good or bad about that. She can either be like, you know, the woman, like, cause I've seen, you know, we both seen there's like boss bitch, like black women on like, and I'm not making like a race comment. I actually saw a black woman like doing her thing on a clip this morning. And she was like, by the way, if a man comes up to me, I'm ready to lay down and do whatever he wants, you know? And she's like, very, like, she's famous for something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so for her giving up control, she has a positive response to that. And I think the ROI of sacrifice for her there is good. Whereas a feminine who has that control leadership thing might, you know, it depends on her response. What is her incentive, right? Does she perceive value in being able to relax into her feminine right shotgun and give up control? Or does she perceive it as a threat to her, who she is, and, you know, how she's come this far as who she is, and how she's seen, right? The value of being perceived by not just the partner, which they should be just focused in that if they're talking about the dynamic, but maybe a lot of her self-esteem and ego has been outsourced to the crowd that sees her as this bitch who controls everything, hypothetically, right? Same with the guy.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe the guy always goes to beer with a bunch of guys that are just lay downs, and they all vibe over it and get drunk and like cope for the fact they can't lead and don't have any balls. Sorry. But like, you know, and then it's like, oh, if I actually like step up to this, then not only in this dynamic, and I'm a little like nervous to make that change and grow out of that and command more respect and maybe lose her, but outside of the dynamic, my friends would be like, what? I don't get what you're doing. Like, I'm not going to fit in here anymore, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting point you make. I mean, I don't have, like, I've gotten rid of so many of those friends, like close friends, but I still, in my wife and I really like pay attention to it in different dynamics. Like, oh, like his, like, you know, the wife controls everything in that dynamic. The wife, you know, we point it out and we can see it, and it's like, yeah, he's weak. You can see it. He's a weak guy.
Even in sales, like we'll like be doing sales training, and so very often you have to talk to two decision makers. You have to involve the spouse. And one of the skills that you train is how do you navigate that? How do you navigate two parties, you know, and what their proximity or lack of proximity and decision-making criteria is. And it's very interesting because sometimes you can just pick up on that. And I don't mean to make, you know, I don't mean to make judgments on necessarily what people are doing within their dynamic, but it is always kind of, dare I say, inching towards objectively true that if, you know, if we're trying to help with decision making and like benefit somebody, and the implication here is that it's a good solution for somebody to invest in, like you're coaching, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the things to address is she's in control and he really sees the value, and him acting against her wishes, where it's like, don't spend that $5,000 on this, is threatening to the deal. Then it becomes like, oh, okay, so how does she benefit from this solution? Or what is her decision-making criteria? Is she so in control that there's never going to be a way to like bring them into a unit that both? It's very interesting. And the reason I went that far when you said, oh, we can tell when the woman's in control, is unfortunately, I think it's in my objective experience having a lot of those scenarios in work, outside work. I don't seem happy.
Mm.
So, and I, as a, strong, independent woman, blah, blah, like it, there's an association between like me being happy and him being able to like, I can trust you to lead the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that the women who really I have found most impressive, and men have a corollary of this too. When we really talk about integration, now are there some relationships? I mean, David Data in his work, he claimed it was about 10%. Maybe that's the case.
What is 10%?
That 10% of relationships have like a flipped polarity. So
Yeah, I
that
actually know a couple happy ones that are like family friends. Like one is like she's a really masculine, he's very like cherished, and honestly, they're really happy and they've been together for like 25 years.
and
It's the definitely I would say it's the smaller.
we'll say it's about 10%. We'll say about 10%
Interesting.
are genuinely in that pole, right? And so they can disregard and do their own thing. But I think what you see in practice is that 80% of relationships have some degree of depolarization today.
Mhm.
And 70% of that 80%, or you know what I'm trying to say, right? That we could view that.
I'm not good at numbers and
Yeah,
statistics.
I don't get on the math, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
They are,
You're talking about minorities.
yeah, right. they are like not happily depolarized. That there's that the woman's controlling things because she's afraid to give up control,
Mhm.
and the man is being passive because he's afraid of being assertive. And when that's completely unconscious, that the woman really believes that she should be in control, but it's making her unhappy,
Mhm.
then those are like the really bad case scenarios. I think that's like the real feminist capture culture kind of relationships. You have varying degrees though, and I think this is a much better prognosis, where you may have these dynamics asserting themselves, but not necessarily out of conscious desire of both
Mhm.
parties. The woman might say to the man, she might be like disrespecting and nagging him, but she might say, "You're supposed to be the man. You're supposed to be the leader." You know what I
Yes.
mean? So she wants him to lead more, but maybe she's not fully letting him. But there's some. That's like that's
Oh, that I see that all the time. So a lot of the like, this happens. It's almost like there's no winning. All right. It's like I need you to be a man and sack up and lead the way. But once you do, I'm gonna punish you for it. Because while I want to see that from you, maybe from a core level, question mark, once you do it, the exact thing I want to see from you is my trigger because I
yeah.
need control. So it's like, well, what do you do? And then that becomes what we're talking about, right? How do you navigate the solution or the irredeemable point that you reach?
This is what I wanted to get to when we did this topic. It was this exact thing. So because I think if someone is really like ideologically captured, even if they're miserable by it, eh, it's really hard to deal with. It's really hard to deal with. I mean, they almost have to something has to happen that deprograms them from that. And it's tough to do within a relationship. It usually takes some external situation, some proverbial come to Jesus moment that they
Yeah, because I think there's a lack of agility that happens with people's ways the more time that they've spent rigid in something.
yes.
So, like, unfortunately, while we can talk about an idealistic way that they like navigate and communicate and then like practice different behaviors and change the dynamic or whatever the fuck we're talking about, like most time life or they have to make it so bad, or there has to be something like such a huge catalyst to
Mhm.
that totally like forces the agility. I'm not saying like you should force people to, be more flexible when they've right. Like that's hard. That's why we're pointing to the fact that like you can't just walk up expecting to change people. But I think that's why most of the time that things break down so hard.
So okay, so let's say you're a guy, you're in a relationship, your woman's nagging you, and she says something like this, like, you need to like you're supposed to be the man, you're supposed to lead more. So then you try to lead, but then she pulls back. She's, she's not kind of fulfilling her end of the bargain, right?
Mhm.
So the response for a man naturally is to like, he's going to feel the pull to depolarize himself, which is to become like more sensitive and resentful.
Yeah.
Right. And almost withdraw.
Yeah.
Which then you create, you know, the pattern resets again.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things. One is she wants, okay, so she expresses she wants him to take control and lead. So he starts taking control and leading. And then she negatively reinforces that.
Yeah.
And he has a couple of routes he can go in, which I think goes back to what I was saying, is I think people have to decide whether they're working on something or not, because you got to, not every part of you is going to be on board with every decision you make.
Mm-hmm.
Not, or, you know, especially those ones that are complicated. And so when you get negatively reinforced for something somebody told you was the solution, it was about to make everything easier, it's like so much energy. It's like, oh my God. Okay. But if you decide that you're all right, remind yourself like, oh, I decided I'm just really going to try to make this work. Then you kind of recruit those like tired, pissed off, like de-incentivized parts of you to be like, yo, I'm, and try not to be resentful about it, but like hold up the mirror to, you needed me to do XYZ. Am I not doing XYZ? Yes. Okay, well, you seem to be unhappy. You were unhappy when I was doing this, and now you're unhappy when I'm doing this. And this is what you said I need, and you need. What am I missing here? And then another roadblock might be, okay, but not. I didn't mean it like that, or not in this situation because, or blah blah blah. And it's like, so then they can keep trying to running into that wall, and then that's where it's like, oh, okay, fuck this.
Well, but as a man, right? And this is a conversation that comes a lot in circles. Like I'm all about agency and choice, right? And I'm really of the belief, I said this morning in response to a tweet, like I do not believe that these dynamics are going to heal unless women decide to take their own course with it. I think that women have to almost take agency and take choice with it, to say like, I want to be more feminine. I want to rediscover this energy.
Yeah.
And some guys point out, and I don't think entirely inconsistently, that, you know, oh, well, going and taking responsibility, is that even like a feminine trait? Now, I would say that's an integration. That's an integration of it. But, you know, that you go from being like, if you look at the sort of like thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? Or the integration process, you have the woman at the lowest level where she's undifferentiated and submissive and irresponsible. She has no responsibility for anything. So then she kind of goes towards like the feminist route where, no, oh no, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to be in control of stuff. But then she's depolarized. So then she takes her newfound autonomy to surrender it back. So now she's chosen to surrender. She's chosen the femininity with her own agency. I think a lot of people don't. I see that that's the route that I think we are going in, and I think that we need to go in, because otherwise the only route back is like down, and the only way we go down is like things get really bad. You know what I mean? Like, so like,
and I think there is, and I agree with you, because I think I see culturally, like air quotes, normie friends, that like when the cultural narrative was boss bitch, they were saying it. And now the cultural narrative on TikTok is like, oh my God, I just want to bake sourdough and relax in my feminine. And now they're like following it. So you can see the echoes of just culture. And you can also tell the people that comply with culture just from an authentic place. And the reason I'm highlighting that is, if you describing the woman choosing to be feminine, is she choosing that, or she just like the idea of it?
well,
Right.
and this is where I think it gets to be complicated. And I still think it's progress, because women are now playing with the idea. It's like they want it, but I don't think a lot of them understand what it's going to cost their ego to get it.
Yeah, that's super fair.
And I think, to be honest, it's the same thing with men on the masculine side. Like, I'm happy to talk about that. The masculinity, like, you want to be the leader, like you want to be honored for, and have all that, you know, energy towards you. Well, you got to take on a lot more responsibility. I mean, Mike, you know, I think you can have this stuff get carried away, but both Mike Cernovich, I think Andrew Tate said at one point too, but Cernovich said it recently, and he basically said, as a man, like, you shouldn't feel comfortable. Like, you should be stressing, you should be, like, you know, worried about stuff, because that means that you're actually doing something valuable, that you're on your edge. And I, you know, I can see where parts of that are maybe not great, in the sense that, you know, I don't think that you should be I don't think that you should be like anxious, you know what I mean? But should you feel pressure on you? Absolutely.
Yeah.
The life of a man, if you want to be a masculine guy, you should be feeling pressure on you 90% of the time. And you have that 10% where where you get the feminine sort of escape. And a lot of times, like, the woman in your life would supposed to almost provide some degree of that role. But
Yeah.
your genuine way of life should be like, I gotta manage this, I gotta do this, I gotta go
Oh,
here.
best. Like, I can't think of a single example where a guy wasn't better or getting better, or because there was some level of pressure on him, right? Like ascending in any sort of way. And I think that the guys that, like, if somebody's listening to this and was like, I can, that scenario, I put $1,000 on it, is he thinks that he's under pressure. And that's not real pressure, right? It's like, oh no, like, da, da, da. It's, you know, and I'm unfortunately thinking of a couple examples, but that's not real pressure. Like, you're not really in a problem here. You need an actual challenge,
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, it doesn't really feel good. I'm this is a scene in my book, but um,
Cool.
did you know that I felt, the morning after I got pardoned, I felt sad?
The morning after you got
Isn't that
pardoned.
crazy? Isn't that crazy? The morning after I got pardoned, I felt sad.
Wait, I want to. Are you? Is this for the book, or can I ask about it?
No, we can talk about it.
Okay, so
Letters from Fort Dix is coming out in a few months. It's not ready yet, but
oh my god, I can't wait to buy it. So you woke up the next morning and you have that moment with yourself where reality sinks in, and then you're kind of like, what thoughts did you have?
it was like,
Did you think like more towards the direction of, oh, I thought I would be happy, but I'm sad, or was it just like, huh? And then you like examined what was coming up, or something different?
it was more the former, but it was like this feeling of, well, what now? You
Mm.
know, it was this feeling like this has been really hard, but it's been really meaningful. And it was like, you felt like you were part of this big story, and it felt like the story had ended. And it felt like, what does my life mean now? Like, what am I gonna do with my life? And I think it's probably how a lot of guys feel when they come back from war. You know, that, like, war, for all of its like chaos and horror, you're with a bunch of other guys, and you have like a clear purpose, a clear mission. And when you take that away, you go back to like the civilian world, which is in many ways very feminine. You're just kind of like, well, what am I doing here? Um, and and to continue that analogy, like, I didn't actually, I felt better later in the day, only because I went and I met the guys as they came out of prison, and I felt like there was like a camaraderie and kind of like a bonding. And then I started to think about my own mission. I'm like, hey, the fight isn't over yet. We got more stuff to do. So I was able to kind of like reconstitute, but not feeling like I was eating shit was actually like somewhat sad in a very, very strange way. And I say all this stuff because I do see a lot of guys online, who complain about this and that in Western Civ, or things with women, and they really don't want to be put under a lot of pressure, though. They don't want that pressure. And I don't think men understand, like, the cost of being masculine is embracing pressure. Like, you only grow as a man in two ways: risk and responsibility. So you have to be either increasing the amount of responsibilities on your plate, or you have to be taking more risks. And anything else, you're not leaning into that energy.
Oh, thought of so many different. Oh, I love. That's such like poetry to that moment. First of all, so many men get depressed when they reach the top of the mountain in success, right? I talk to all these successful businessmen that my like normal friends are like, wow, you know, this like rich guy that owns this. It's like, and I low key secretly never know he's really sad. And he has everything that you would think that want. And, you know, it's because, and it's funny, I'm also thinking of a meme my friend slash mentor, Oliver, sent me one time and was like, enjoy pushing your thing up the hill or whatever. It's like this big rock. I was like, talking about like stuff having behind the scenes and like work and sharing wins. And I'm drawing those two things is because in a relationship, like I know I'm departing a little bit from men do well under pressure with some sort of thing and they need that. If you were to extrapolate that to a relationship, the beginning phase where you're really worried whether you're going to work out or you're worried about whether you're going to commit or end up together and all this stuff. Honestly, like people in their rooms alone with all their certain, they're like, oh, fuck. I wish I could just have emotional security and tie them down. But when you zoom out and you talk to the people who've been married for 30 years, which I'm so glad I know couples like this who remind me like, I know this kind of sucks right now, but remember, this is the fun part. Like when you have all that in the future, you're going to miss this part where you're like, oh shit, does he like me? Oh my God, is that the one? But in the thing, it's like pressure. Same thing with professional things. It's like, oh no, like I just want to be at $1 million, like, or I want to be like I want to be the CEO, whatever it is. But if you can zoom out, it's like the pressure in that and residing in that pressure is where so much of the greatness is, you know?
Absolutely. And you know, the man gets the honor he's looking for from being under the pressure, right? And he's supposed to be dealing with that pressure so the feminine doesn't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And the feminine is able to, you know, more like, because and that's the thing is that like I think a lot of women, because they want to have that, and this is a lot of like the feminist influence, they want to have that that sort of honor from being under the pressure, but the pressure really, I'm not saying women are not capable of dealing with it from a certain extent. Like I'll give an anecdote in a second from, because I do think like okay, I'll just give the anecdote. So from Grapes of Wrath. Grapes of Wrath was a, you know, Steinbeck, great book. Very depressing book, obviously. If anybody knows what it's about, it's basically Great Depression, Dust Bowl, Oklahoma farmers lose their farm, go to California because they're being flyered, told that there's work over there. There's no work over there. It's like, you know, poverty level fruit picking. They live in basically camps. The ending starts to get really horrific, and these really tough men, like frontier men, right, living in they they were used to being the men of the house, right? By the end, they just completely break. And I think women, especially when kids are involved, women will do what they have to do and take up the banner with it. And so, and that's why you see like all this, you know, I think often honest, but also often maybe cruel and unfair comments about single moms, because single moms do tend to have like a more rough around the edges kind of attitude towards them. Well, they do that because they have to go into their masculine because they're the ones who are now dealing with the perimeter. So women can do it, but I think it does like it damages them. It damages their femininity in some way. And
yeah,
they
but
have
I also think they're safer leaning into that because like the ones that are single moms and there's no like that, because I know a lot of strong women, but like it's more of a, unfortunately, like if she doesn't have any of that, there's more risk and liability with like them and their child, you know.
absolutely no, it's absolutely true. I think that they get put in a really bad situation. I mean, I don't think that they have to do it, but they have to probably do it, a lot of it, in the dating process until they can really screen, you know, the next man who's gonna be like a stepfather for their children, to make sure he's actually gonna be like a good dude. Because otherwise, yeah, I think that you enter into a situation where she takes that deal and then the guy treats your kid like crap. It's a possibility. I don't know if that's the norm or not, how much of it is just that they don't trust men anymore, but it's historically certainly been a risk for women to do that. But you know, but I think if we're talking about like, I don't think women though, like the more pressure I'm under, for instance, the more I feel good. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel good, but I feel good. Like it sucks, but it charges me. Like I can feel my core getting charged. I don't think that's the case for women. I see women really get like they'll deal with it because they have to, especially if their children's involved. But it really like it really, I think it frazzles and stresses them out, and it's they want to have more of that feminine space to be able to relax and to heal and to like enjoy like community and connection, present moment, rather than have all these pressures and crap thrown on them. Um, but the difficulty is like, are the guys willing to do that? Like, I agree with women on the internet who point this out. Like, a lot of guys won't even fucking pay the bill, let alone they want to be the man in the relation. They won't even pay the bill. You know, they want to be the man in the relationship, but they're making their wife work a job she doesn't like because they want her money for the family with that. Um,
You run into a lot of like, this is an accusation that I'm questioning. The money thing and the polarity thing seems to come up a lot in your work, huh?
well,
Or maybe I'm like wildly unaware, even though I feel like I have a lot of data points and socially, is I don't see it. I guess I don't get, I don't know that I get exposed to that being an issue as much as you do, which is surprising.
I think a lot of it depends on a few things. It depends on to what degree they're going into the polarity. It depends on to what degree the woman loves her work and the work is stressful. You know, if a like I actually think that the whole idea of like when this topic, and it's very easy for it to happen, but when the topic gets conflated into women working not being feminine, I don't agree with that. I think that women, it just depends on what do you mean by work. Like
Yeah.
women like doing things. I
Yeah.
one of the
In fact,
worst things a guy can get in a woman is a woman who just wants to sit at home and do nothing. Like I
yeah,
just
that's what I was gonna say. That in a marriage dynamic, if she has nothing to do and you're, when you're like,
probably gonna be fucking somebody, to be honest.
yeah, she's
Like
cheating on you, or she's like, you have the 400% burden of entertaining her or being her challenge. Because I do think would partially disagree with the fact that we don't need any pressure or challenge. I think we need some, but it's like, how are we getting that met?
yeah. Yeah. Well, elaborate on that. Elaborate on
Um, so, and I love I love my work. I love the challenge of like, yapping to people and trying to reach solutions and a good da da da. And if you were to think, if I was to, this is an interesting thought experiment. So, when you talk about the idea of, if you want her to relax in her feminine and you're paying for everything and she doesn't have to work, and I wonder, like, I would definitely still like, I don't see myself being the kind of person in that scenario, if that's an option, not doing anything. First of all, because I spent my whole life like being really good at entertaining the shit out of myself from a kid, right? Like even when I didn't have as much, sorry, mom, like I didn't have great like parenting at certain phases. So my thing was like, I always found a way to entertain myself. I would explore, I would do the journals, I would like, work, pick up shifts when really young, like all these different things. So I've always done that. And I found so much joy living that way. So if I think about, oh, I don't have to worry about anything, then, whether it's hobby or work or paid vocation, there's something or workout, there's something needs to be something I'm conquering and challenged by. And I probably figure that out for myself. So then if you extrapolate that to a woman, or the opposite, where it's like, oh, these people are getting married. He wants her to relax in her feminine, and he's providing for everything. And she has trouble. I guess there's two ways you go. It could be like the woman who has trouble, she has trouble letting go of her work or her hobbies or something. I guess that would be one scenario. Then that becomes a friction point. Or is it, I'm taking care of everything because I want her to relax in her feminine, but now I've done that so much and she has no I'm gonna be kind of mean and say she has no substance, she has no interest, she has no hobbies, she has nothing that she can entertain herself with. Then
I think that those are the most useless women, to be honest. I don't, because those women
like
don't
they've got a hobby.
they don't like at least with a woman who's working, like if she's boring but she's working, at least she's contributing something financially. But a woman who's just like dead and dull, like and I don't work with a lot. I've worked with some clients who have marriages like this, but um it seems less common than before, just simply because I don't think they have the economics to support it. But I think it was certainly very common 20, 30 years ago, where you'd have a lot of women who, guy would pay for stuff and she'd sit at home and watch TV all day. And I don't know. To me, this is like, I don't even want to talk about it, because it triggers me on some level. Like I don't consider that a useful relationship, but
So I think a big element that I focus on with when I help people with their self-development is find something to get you interested in, whether
yeah,
it's your work or it's not outside your work, right? If you're not interested in what you're doing, but you're not like, it's not ruining your life, then outsource your ascend, like your leveling upness or your whatever with a hobby, or make those congruent ikagi or whatever the Japanese thing that you've talked about.
yeah.
Right. And I think that's a major solution for no matter what your gender or relationship status is. And when you talk about being triggered by like, oh, the woman's just sitting home at TV, it makes me think of external pressure, which we talked about at the beginning, which is if you have a chick and you're paying for everything and you're working most of the time and she has no substance, no interest, no hobbies, and she hasn't like, and her objective isn't to go find one and like create one, then what is she exposed to as an opportunity to like for dopamine and entertainment? Social media is probably one of those primary things. And then when you're exposed to social media, what do you look at? You see all these different things that might give you FOMO if you don't have like if you don't have anything that makes you feel good about yourself because you're achieving it, right? Then is that a healthy or an unhealthy?
Yeah, no, I I
I
guess
just
I guess to clarify, when I said that, I'm thinking of it like, and then you come home and she's still just, there's nothing there, right? I think if actually, and probably a lot of guys would agree with me. I don't actually know if it says anything good about guys that this is the case, but if she did sit at home and do nothing, but then we came home and she was like super excited to see us and she was super pleasant and she was like, really cared about, like, I think guys wouldn't care. You know what I mean? They'd be like, all right,
yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean? It's different because now she's actually like, she's acting more of like a muse. I think I meant it more in the sense
Oh, okay.
of where they're just like a dead weight. They're not pleasant to be around, but they don't do anything. But no, if they're like, if you come home and they're like all about you and they're bubbly and they're, I guess it does, like, no one cares if you watch a couple hours of like soap operas and stuff like that. It doesn't.
Yeah, that's actually a really good case for like women who don't like honestly, I don't know how this is gonna sound out loud, but like if she doesn't need any interests or hobbies and she's fine and she's not resentful with a lack of interest or hobbies, and she's just really like happy to just la la la, then babe, then
He
cool. Because
His
the
belly full and his balls empty.
yeah, and then if it doesn't impact anything in a negative way, great. Maybe her fascination is just serving the relationship, and then in the meantime, she doesn't feel a need to like do anything else. Like whatever.
Well, the
Uh,
thing is, like, I do think women who fully master the feminine energy actually do not have to do anything. To a certain, they don't have to do anything from the standpoint of like, well, how we view doing things from a masculine sense, because I think that they tap into that sort of muse, and the muse is almost like she almost amplifies anything that the guy does. Like if a guy is coming home to a woman who's happy to see them, eager to sleep with them, play, positive energy, positive emotion, like most guys, any guy who's not like totally messed up and doesn't feel like he doesn't deserve that, like that's gonna make them feel like they want to conquer the world for that woman. They're gonna be so happy to give that woman anything that she wants. And that's sort of like one of these secrets I think that a lot of women don't know about men, that like so much they could get so much from the guy if they help to charge his energy. And I understand some men are like moribund and they don't really, they need a little bit more of it. They don't have as much spirit in them, but it's it's a very different way of looking at things though, because it's like, how do you get things without doing stuff? But It's really
so interesting you use the word secret, and that stood out to me because it's so interesting that that's like perceived as a secret. Where I guess if we could say like a healthy feminine energy would be her ego's tied up to making your life better.
yeah.
Right? Like your life is better because I'm in it. And maybe that looks like me like cooking or cleaning or being pleasant. Shit, what a concept.
And that's it. And I think that the discussion starts to degrade when it starts to be, or not degrade, but lose the essence of it when it starts to be like, well, a woman has to cook and she has to clean and she has to, because now we're talking about, okay, you have these roles, and the roles, I think they acted socially as scaffolding to kind of maintain some degree of the polarization, but they were unconscious, I think, in a lot of senses.
Yeah, there was no other options. That
Yeah,
was what it did.
there was no other options, and I think it's powerful to have women consciously choose this stuff, and they can consciously choose even to work, so long as within the relationship capacity, like if the work is draining them, and then because they're drained, they're depolarized, and then they bring that depolarization into the relationship, I think that the work creates an issue. But if their work is like charging them up, they're positive, and they still have space to play that role within the relationship, I think you're looking at a very integrated woman there. And then the man can really like love her from every side of things, because he can be actually some degree impressed by her and what she's able to do, but she still makes him feel like a man. And I met a woman when I was in Tampa at biohacking, Jay Campbell's biohacking conference. So it was a concert. I met I met a woman there, Wendy. She was a widow at this point. She had but she was like radiant. She was like a fairy godmother. And she was talking about like her marriage and everything. She's a super successful woman, but she was so feminine, and she was talking about that in her marriage. It's very, a shame that he passed away, but I was like, you had something beautiful that a lot of people can never even dream of having. You had it for 20 years. Um, I think it's a real gift. It's a real gift, but women are able to choose that and understand to apply that within a relationship. They'd be a lot happier. So much of it is just this ego thing. And what I'm really curious about, Trina, I'm going to check the chat, but I really want, like, how does a man, and I want to at least tackle it from this side first. How does a man get a woman to almost in a relationship, if they're suffering some of these depolarization issues, how does he get her to seek that change? How does he do it? I mean, because there's a lot of traps here. Like, you don't want to be like trying to make her do something. What do you think? How do you go about doing it?
This is really good because I think that you need to be really explicit, right? Like, I think you need to say what your ego wants to be obvious, right? I think because you're getting a certain pattern, you're navigating a certain pattern a certain way with her, and if you want to talk about her changing, then you need to make it really clear what certain things and behaviors and actions and things mean to you, which also requires you like being grounded in what those things mean to you with yourself, right? Because you can't really be explicit about, and it's really delicate, like you said, right? Because you don't want to make her feel bad for certain things that need to change, or you could just turn her into an enemy where she's like, fuck you, and you're da da da. So that's unfortunately that requires a level of skill with how different things are now, right? Like, which is why people invest in like coaching to like go to account. So I think on one level, it's some sort of explicitness is like, hey, the question becomes, how am I making this explicit? I need to confront an elephant or address an issue. And I need to lower the risks of me turning her into the enemy when I'm trying to recruit her for this shared cause that hopefully my intentions are for us to both benefit. I need to find a way to make it really, really, really clear that I'm not saying the bad things are things that I view her bad for. I'm just saying like the way that, honestly, I don't know. It depends. Like it depends on her, right? Like it depends on her sense of self and her triggers and her associations. Can you be like, yo, you're getting a little weight and I don't want to have sex with you right now? I don't know. But can you say things like, babe, you know, it's going to be a hard conversation. You work with a lot of men.
Mhm.
And so if the guy can't talk about the fact that you're working with a lot of men, it's insulting to him because that's going to feel him like him emasculating himself. Then, that's not something that's really hard to address, not only with the other person, but with yourself. Is she gaining weight? And she's going to be like, oh my God, he doesn't love me. And then she's going to shut down and not have sex with me even more. These are all the risks that come into play when you address things and change behavior and change things. So, your question was like, how do they do that? It has to, the solution is not avoid it.
Yeah.
Right. If we talk about what we want, we have to talk about what we don't want. So if you want that to change and the only alternative to confronting the issue is avoiding it, there's no risk-free choice. You avoiding it is asking it to grow. Your resentment grows, their patterns grow, I think it's a non-negotiable that if you want to give things a chance to be better, you either confront it and give it a chance to be better and try to navigate as best you can and find as many resources as you can, invest in help, whatever it is, or you avoid it and you guarantee that it gets worse.
Yeah, I think you have to be, and this is the difficult thing, is because, the feminine grows by praise, but the ego humility doesn't, right? so, if the barrier to the feminine is the ego, you have to address the ego first. How do you do that? How do you do that?
I think one of really helpful thing is pulling an association in her brain, in her world, in her definition of worlds that has a reasonableness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Has maybe something personal with her, right? Like, babe, remember that time that you did XYZ and hopefully she has some sort of experience with being reasonable and like wanting something to get better. And she doesn't, that might be a red flag. Like it makes it easier for her to step into your shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, remember that time you had to confront that thing with your friend that we both know you love them. And, we both know that you saying this might risk her thinking that you like judge her, but you know what I mean? Like something like that. Like, I think those are really helpful because you step into their world and you translate what you're trying to get across in her language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think that you need that anchor.
Or just balls to the wall and like take the risk, like, because they're either gonna, and because you either examine the risks of that and try to navigate as well, or you're just like, listen, this is gonna sound like I am blah 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 blah, but I don't know how to say this well, and I really hope that we can collaborate next. But this is what I'm thinking, and I'm so sorry, or whatever. Just like throw it on the fucking table and sort out all the shit together, and hopefully she cares enough to sort through the shit with you and like find the gold.
Yeah, I think as a guy, if you have to, when you have that conversation, you need to feel like you're pretty much on point with your own behavior at that time. And when you enter into it, you don't want to enter into the conversation with a lot of emotion. You want to be as like neutral and sincere as you possibly can. This isn't about like I think this is the difference between like having a hard conversation versus having like a fight. A fight is when you're in this super emotional state and she's in emotional state and it just goes like crazy mode because it's two egos going against each other. So if you're going against your ego, you have to, as much as possible, be above the pattern. So that means also taking responsibility for ways that you've been contributing to the pattern, but to basically say like, I don't want this. I don't want this. This is what's going on. I don't want it.
But not just, I think you can make it a little bit more, you can increase the surface area of opportunity to make things better by not only, I don't want this.
To make it more positive, right? I want this. Yeah, you're right. I agree with you. That's a better way to put it.
Yeah, like I don't need, and remember that it's serving your best interest too. So like,
positive vision versus just a negation.
Yeah, like I don't like that. Now do something about it.
No, you're right. I actually like, I even no, I honestly like, I think I said earlier about saying what you want, and I don't, the way I was going about it right then, I didn't, talking simply in negatives is not constructive, and it's not leading really.
Well,
Uh,
it can be. It's okay to like be imperfect and have a moment where you just say like, "Fuck that, I don't like that." But
yeah.
if we're talking about trying to have a productive conversation, yeah, I know you agree with me. Like, but like, you know, what might that look like? It's like, listen, and taking the lens of the relationship, right? Because it isn't just about my needs. It's I need to talk to you about this that causes this. I view this as a risk to our relationship, and that's growing or that's
Yeah,
bothering me,
yeah.
even if it's unreasonable. And I think that if, and I don't want to like, and I know that like I don't want the solution to be ask you to change who you are, but I would like to, are you down to have an open conversation about that? Because I think that if we could find some way to like, you know, address this or adjust it, that we would both be more satisfied in this way because I'll feel this way and I can, and you know, blah, blah, blah. And I need to feel this to feel that, right? It's almost like it's almost like an, like, what does operationally it look like to clear these feelings and appreciating that this might be unreasonable, but let's like talk about it.
Well, yeah, you think, what, I want this. Do you want this? Right? Do you want this part kind of dynamic for yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want this for yourself too, we both want the same thing. So, and the way that we're doing things is not getting us there. So this has to change if we're gonna get there. These are things that are gonna have to be addressed, right?
What's the argument fallacy name where they might, because I'm thinking of the woman reacting. What's the argument fallacy name when you like make a point to somebody and then they leapfrog to,
Straw man.
maybe, actually I don't even know the names, so I don't know why I'm asking you, like I want to recognize it, but like, okay, so a scenario there could be like, listen, you want this, right? So this means this makes me feel like, if she's like, okay, but you shouldn't even feel that way because XYZ, then I think it's helpful to not give up there.
I think you have to be really firm about what you want,
Yeah.
and to loop back to the very beginning of this, live stream. When you're in a relationship and you're growing in a direction, you don't want that pattern anymore. You want the relationship to be a different way. You're going in that direction. You can't, like, she might be afraid to change because she's afraid of what it looks like. I think you almost have to leverage that fear to some extent. Be like, we keep doing what we're doing, it's going off the tracks. Like, if you want to do this with me, this is where I'm going. I want you to go there with me. It gives you what you want, it gives me what I want. But and then along with that is changing the environmental stressors. So if you're with a woman, and let's say, and again, I don't think that work itself is necessarily the issue, but let's say she has a job, she doesn't like the job, but she's been doing it because it brings an income. Like, if you have a woman who, if the woman you're with does not like her work, you gotta have a plan to get her out of it. Because if she stays in it, that's gonna constantly rub off on the relationship, especially because you're not just dealing with her lack of enjoyment and stress, but to some extent she's also like being led by some other guy or boss.
I don't, honestly, I just agree with you there. I see that dogma on Twitter all the time, and I feel like it. I don't, well, we finally found someone where we disagree. Let's talk about this really
Yeah,
quick.
yeah.
You know, at the end, I don't. Maybe this is, actually I'm super biased, right? But I think it's silly for you guys to view that way, and this is why I think that the dynamic, you're almost comparing like the fact that because there's a man and a leader in a certain dynamic that she's involved in, and you're a man and a leader in the most important dynamic in her life, that's a comparison. In my view, I don't really see it that way. But if we're talking from yeah, you should take responsibility as a masculine to provide if you want her to relax in her feminine, she's really unhappy in her role. Sure, like maybe from the man's thinking, that's the perception. But I don't know how much that benefits you as a place to start thinking from, you know? Like, I think almost if you're going to address that and she's unhappy, of course, save her. Like, I talked to so many male prospects on some sort of make money offer, and they haven't even addressed it with the wife, and they know she's miserable. And it's like, and you keep going layers. And he's like, yo, low key, I would love to fucking retire my wife and be that, but I don't feel like I can do it. And so
Yeah.
they don't even talk about it. Right. And there's that like deep provider instinct, whatever. But going back to your point of, you know, if you view that as an incentive to get her out of that job and it's going to make you both happier, then use that, right? I don't believe in being all light, no shadow. And sometimes shadow catalyzes really good, positive some things. But if it's just something that fucks with you, and if you were to change it, like you wouldn't getting a positive ROI, I keep using ROI, it makes it so impersonal, for the dynamic. And that's just threatening your fact that you're a man and leader in her life. And then that can also point in the other direction of like, don't you trust that like you're the most important guy in her life?
Well, I don't know if you're misunderstanding what they're saying or if I'm misunderstanding what they're saying, but from how I've interpreted that argument is that it's not so much that she is like all about her boss, like he's the leader in my life, you know.
Yeah, that's what it implies to me. It's like you're competing with somebody who's not your competition.
I don't view it from the standpoint that they're concerned that she's emotionally more involved with the boss. Obviously, sometimes that happens, but that's not. I don't think the complaint. I think it's that the demands of work take precedent over the demands of the marriage.
Actually, yeah, I've brought that issue to a relationship before.
So it's that you take second place and you're not getting the focus of her energy. The relationship isn't getting it because she's got to do these things. And I actually think, and it doesn't get enough attention, but I think not the same, but a very similar dynamic is at play even with guys who work for somebody else, because in that case, you know, a woman, like he's got this job, he's got stuff to do, but he's doing it because some other guy told him he had to do it. And I think that the woman can also have some level of, you know, oh, well, my man is like subservient to another man. He's lower on the pecking order.
Yeah, that's a really good. You just did what I talked about earlier. The solution. Yeah, that's a really good point. Because it's
Like,
almost like if I suffer because some other guy's telling you what to do, then it's like my angry, internal, emotional, unreasonable voice might be like, "You're being his bitch," and like this is the most important thing. So now I can actually have more empathy for what you're talking about from the guy's standpoint. And then I think of a memory of me causing that exact problem in a past relationship where I had we'd been dating, and then I entered a month where I needed to like nose to the grindstone, work all day every day, and then the times that we would hang, I couldn't help but check my phone and my work messages. But when he addressed it, I was like, oh shit, you're right. Now I'm like, oh, those husbands I speak to, they're not being present with their lives. And I think it was emasculating that I said that so candidly because he's the man, right? So then I was like, fuck, now I'm emasculating him. So, and then anyways, this whole like fight blew up, and I was like, okay, I need to correct this, and this is the solution. And I'm so sorry, but I was like, and while I'm going to now, my responsibility is like, whenever we carve out time, he's like, I don't care that you work. I love that you have your own thing going on. It's one of the things I like most about you. You know, when you were with me, like I'm not, he's like, I'm not one of your bros, you know? And I was like, okay, G-checked me. Cool. Respect that. But then the part that I couldn't get resolved, it was, okay, now the solution is me being present with you and leaving work at work when I'm with you, which is just more than fair. When that was done, there was still resentment towards work. So then it points to, oh, you're like, the solution is, okay, then make it so she doesn't have to work. Or is it even the idea when we're not together and we spend all this time and I'm working? Because I was like, okay, but another thing I need from you is I'm a working woman. And I'm going to go through, by the way, my schedule flexibility complements normal jobs when I've dated normies, right? Like that's and I love that, right? Like I love it for myself, and I love it for being able to like find my person. But I am going to go through seasons where I have a responsibility to fulfill, and I would really like to feel supported, you know, like during those times, because I'm a working, you know, unless you're like, so it's like we're talking about, it's like the layers. And I think there was another element to it that might be something for other men, where it's like the idea of you spending all this time working around all these men and competing, we had to have a really serious conversation of like, listen, you know, are you worried that I'm gonna like cheat on you? Or is it the idea of me paying attention to other men like that sucks, or what is it? And he wasn't willing to like look at those things with me. And maybe we weren't there yet enough in our bond, or maybe he would never have been able to. I don't know. It doesn't really matter anymore. But all of those things are kind of supporting your point. You know what I mean? Like that's a modern problem.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, historically, families were basically all had their own businesses. I mean, whether it was a farm or whether, they had a shop, it was mostly family businesses. And you did have a couple of, you had some laborers, and sometimes those laborers were married, but it wasn't as much of a common thing. And I just want to give like an anecdote about this from the male side, like the male pecking order thing affecting women too and their perception of women. Really interesting. So kind of a dark topic, but those who know, military wives,
Just spoke.
very
Oh my God, just a gentleman last night who got cheated on in a 15-year relationship, and he was just in Iraq.
It's just,
last night.
I mean, crazy slut life going on with like really, really bad stuff. And not all of them, obviously. There's a segment that are like, I don't know, vasopressin bonding with their husbands. They're committed to the institution, and they kind of bear the burdens just like their husbands. But a lot of these women stray 100%. It's a really common thing. It's understandable to some extent. I mean, it's fucked up. Don't get me wrong.
Let's not pretend that the guy has no influence on that dynamic.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, I think this is also an example of circumstance creating a hard time, because you're dealing with employments, deployments, etc. But I think that there's another layer here, which is a real factor, which is that those men do not have any control over their lives. Those men are under a hierarchy. And what's interesting is this: officers' wives don't cheat very much, but it's the enlisted men whose wives cheat on them, especially the ones, especially when they're not non-commissioned officers. So like the lower down the pecking order, like you're a private first class, you're a corporal, you just got married, you're getting deployed, you got a 80% chance you're going to get cheated on. You know what I mean? But let's say it's a big flip in the other direction if you're a lieutenant, because the lieutenant commands men, and the woman sees this to some extent. There's something going on with it. There's a status element that, she might be drawn towards the man. He's a military man. He's a fighter. I love him. And then she sees like he's constantly getting told what to do.
It's such a black pill, because what if you're finding the love of your life when he's on the come up and he's just not there yet?
I don't. You mean
what if you start as a basic training and then you go to lieutenant or whatever? I don't know what the hierarchy is.
Well,
so
you can become an officer after being a non-commissioned officer.
The study you're illustrating.
You typically, if you come in enlisted, you typically are going to stay enlisted. You could become a non-commissioned officer like a sergeant, but you're typically not going to jump into a commission. You can go to officer candidate school and you can jump, but it's not a typical thing. You typically come in as a commissioned officer, second lieutenant, and then you rise through the ranks, up to general. Or you come in as a private first class, private first class, and you end up at there's varying iterations of sergeant. So you get some status when you get to become like a sergeant, because now you have like real, to be honest, those are the guys who really run the military, because they're the ones. To be a sergeant, you have like lots of experience dealing with grunts, whereas as you go up in the officer chain, you end up becoming much more dealing with battle plans and stuff like that. You're still a leader, but you're less.
Yeah, that's such a black pill study, because that study almost supports the idea that like women wait for you at the finish line, and I don't see that.
I think many do, but the issue here is more that I think just the dynamics of the military. Like when you join the military as an enlisted man, you have no control over your life, and you're being told what to do without any regard for anything. So the woman is feeling indirectly disregarded, because of the man's inability to give any kind of security to her because he's at the whim of the military. But also she's seen that he has no control. He just gets told what to do all the time. I think that on a subconscious level, it makes women disgusted. I think so. And it's like it becomes a big comfort issue, especially once the guy gets deployed. She's like, this guy never took care of me. Like, he was never there emotionally for me. And, and she might start to lose respect for him because he has no control over his life. I think that's one of the things about it that's really dark, because the big red pill for me with it was that it doesn't really happen so much to the officers.
Yeah.
And they're being deployed too.
I don't like that. I don't know that it's helpful either.
This is what I would tell guys, is that if you're just joining the military for like a standard 4-year term, maybe depending on your MO, 8-year, I probably wouldn't get married during that. She probably wouldn't do it. I mean, I know it happens all the time because war enhances romance, and you can't control these sort of things. But it seems tough. And I've worked with military guys, and it's tough, not only just because of what I said, but because, like, okay, I just got deployed. You know what I mean? I'm like gone for a few months now. It's just really difficult. It's a really difficult life. And that's why military wives have. Go ahead.
But love isn't reasonable.
It's not reasonable, but it also seems like military love is often capricious.
Yeah.
And not all. Like, there are definitely ride or dies.
No, I know. I'm thinking of an exception I went to high school with, and every time I see him on Instagram, they're like, "Oh my god, he just stopped on." But then I try to think of the guy I had last night, where he's like talking about a front row seat to all these like vulgar solutions that him and the buddies are talking about, because of like they either don't have somebody waiting at home for them who's either cheating on them or waiting for them, and so then they have needs and all that. And it's really black pill, which is why I had to like cover my mouth when you're saying that, because I'm like, I know it's a reality. I don't know what. But it's like, if you put yourself in the shoes of people who are falling in love and then he's leaving, it's like, and
it's stressful. Like, imagine you've really fallen for a woman, you go on deployment, and she's being sparse with you, especially if it's like a wartime deployment. I think it just fucks with guys' heads a lot, but it happens, and it's gonna happen. It happened. It's like it's a built-in feature.
The real question, I think, is one element is nurturing it as much as you can, right? Or maybe that's only letters. And then the other element of it is congruence between what she's showing up to that page writing you letters as, and what she's showing up to her life as, right? Like,
It also just depends on what basis was the dynamic formed. Like, I think there's a lot of drama,
right?
Romantic drama implicit with a guy going off to war. So a woman could fall for him because he's going on, he's a hero. He's going to be a hero. He's going to go off the war. I think that there's something in the feminine that wants to bless those men. I really do. I really think that
you're talking about that. I'm thinking about the virginity thing you told me about.
Yeah. I think that there's something in them that wants to bless them and wants to give it up for them. You know what I mean? But I don't know if it's like it's not always like a ongoing thing. I don't know. It's like, I want to bless you, but now go off and we're going to see which one of you come back. I don't know. It's very I don't know, Trina, this stuff is really dark, but I think that there's something to it on a very, very deep level. I think that there's something to it, but this is this is a different topic than our relationship.
Yeah, we really debate on this one.
We'll wrap it up.
Where should we land?
I don't know. I think this was good. We'll just land here.
Okay.
I hope you.
Man.
Yeah, we're gonna land here. All right.
All right, bye guys.
I can't think of how to sum it up. We covered so much, and it was really great. I think it was a beautiful conversation, especially talking about polarity. And I really encourage you guys to rewatch. Especially
okay, all right. No, now it feels like pleasantry, so we can just
the center part. Rewatch the entire thing.
Subscribe button below. Follow Pat Stedman.
Subscribe below. and follow us on X. All right. See you
Bye.
guys. Talk next time.